Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to our channel and thanks for logging on. Today I have for you a Geneva annual calendar jamboree between the reigning power, Patek Philippe, and its 5235G regulator, and the Laurent Ferrier Montre Ecole Galet annual calendar. These timepieces, similar in size, similar in function, and separated by only a few miles within the canton of Geneva, represent the haut de gamme in the year 2018. Let's start with the veteran among the two. Previewed in 2011 but not fully launched until 2013, the Patek Philippe 5235 is a bit of a sensation in that it breaks up previous Patek design language, does so in a fashion that's logical and functional, and adds both new design and new movement architectures to the mix. This is a watch that's easy to wear at 40.5 millimeters on the wrist. You're going to find they're similar in size, but it's the thickness, or I should say lack thereof, of the Patek Philippe at only 10.4 millimeters that makes this an easier watch to wear with a cuff. Lug to lug, it's 47.8 millimeters against the 47 of the Galet annual calendar, so they're similar in that respect, but it's the profiling and the slimness of the Patek that sets it apart aesthetically as well as dimensionally from the Montre Ecole. The timepiece is remarkably sharp. Look at the lines of the case, inspired by the vintage reference 3448 from the 60s through the 80s. That provides the essential design language of the case, which is almost a high horology take on the classic Hoyer Carrera, as the lugs are remarkably sharp. They look as though they could draw blood. A combination of satin finish and polished elements break up the mass of the metal. Not that it is a monolithic thing, but the attention to detail is much appreciated. The dial is where this one really sets itself apart from any past Patek precedent. First, look how discreet the marquee is. Patek Philippe is ghosted onto this dial and almost invisible from an arm's length. The dial itself features an ambitious vertical satin grain that appears almost like the stainless steel of DeLorean, and there are elements of blue about the dial. The date, and the month in the calendar complications, as well as the numbers outboard, blued needle-style hands for the regulator display, large railroad scale at 12 for the hours, smaller, tighter railroad scale at 6 o'clock for the constant seconds, and yes, pull the crown, hacking seconds. You can set this one precisely to the second. Finally, pusher adjusters on the case flank to adjust the calendar, and on the case back, I mentioned there was a new movement with this watch, and indeed, it's not the well-known caliber 240 micro rotor. This is an all-new architecture only loosely related to its illustrious micro rotor predecessor. This is the caliber 31260 REG for regulator, so it is an entirely different bridge layout. If you look at a 240, it's not as big as this movement, which is 33 millimeters in diameter, and it doesn't have the same bridge architecture. This almost has a little bit of a visual ode to the old finger-style bridges in Geneva watchmaking. You could see the barrel, the great wheel, because it's not a center wheel, the third wheel, fourth wheel, and then escape wheel with the anchor impulsing the balance. And this is where the watch gets really tech, because Patek implemented most of the innovations from the Advanced Research series on this watch. It has a Spiromax silicone hairspring. It has the Pulsomax silicone escapement operating unlubricated, 48-hour power reserve, 22-karat gold winding mass. Although it bears the Patek Philippe seal, make no mistake, these are the old finishing standards of the Côte de Genève. You can see the mirrored chamfering of the bridges as well as the polishing of all the screw and jewel countersinks. Every screw black polished, and you'll also note a tight micro perlage below the rotor and a macro perlage on the base plate, so two different engine turning patterns. Linear Côte de Genève laid down perfectly aligned across the bridges. It beats away at its own quirky silicon escapement beat rate of 23,040 beats per hour, so it even has its own distinct voice and heartbeat when you hold it up against the ear. Now, the timepiece does feature an annual calendar that needs to be adjusted only once per year, the jump from February to March. This was Patek Philippe's own innovation in 1996. They introduced this complication to the industry, and in my opinion, there is no watch in the current Patek collection that better represents the annual calendar than this easy-to-read annual calendar regulator, possibly Terry Stern's finest work as the head honcho and lead design voice at Patek Philippe. Now let's jump to the 2018 star with another dial, also in what Laurent Ferrier describes as slate gray rather than a more silver metallic. This is a ruthenium-coated dial with a combination of colors: white, ruthenium, blue, and red that makes it just a little bit livelier than the Patek. You'll also note the anti-reflective coating is not quite as effective, but it has a handsome crosshair display, and all is forgiven by the fact that this watch, though it doesn't feature the Patek's hacking seconds, does feature a bi-directional system for setting the calendar, and you can set the calendar using only the crown and the pusher adjuster for the day of the week, so you need no tool to set the system. The assegai or spear style hands that are the signature of Laurent Ferrier. You'll note the nuance of the dial. The Patek has several different layers and metallic finishes, but this watch also has several different layers, as there's a circular concentric brush graining about the hour track as well as the date ring, and then there's that vertical satin striation. This dial also has more depth to it than the Patek, with a more pronounced and deeper channeling about the faceting of the apertures for the day and the month. Turn it all over, it's impressive, no doubt. This is the 5th manufacture movement from Laurent Ferrier. This is the caliber Laurent Ferrier 12601. Manual wind, 80-hour power reserve. It features a hidden power reserve display that only comes to light when you turn the watch over, keeping the dial clean and unadorned. Nicely executed. You'll see that same mirrored beveling, the chamfer on the edges of all the bridges. This watch actually features a ruthenium-coated dial and a ruthenium-coated movement as well. Let's see if I can get that smudge off there. So you have a different and darker finish about this caliber than the rhodium-plated brass of the Patek Philippe, which is more of a traditional Geneva shine. When you look at the movements side by side, you can see the Patek has a more interesting caliber architecture. It is more handsome from an artistic standpoint. It was designed as well as engineered, whereas I get the sense that the Laurent Ferrier caliber was engineered and then finished, and there is a difference. It doesn't seem that this layout was designed by an artist and then executed by an engineer's computer. This seems more like an incidental adaptation of other architectures. Large single mainspring barrel. You will note the timepiece with a overcoil, but not a Breguet overcoil, retaining only the Liga-etched escape wheel and anchor of the more sophisticated Laurent Ferrier calibers. This is not one of the double direct impulse calibers. It does feature a high degree of precision, and it is adjusted in a chronometer busting 6 positions, but this 23 jewel movement is not the double impulse system. It has been simplified. So this case, all in steel and 40 millimeters, considerably chunkier. We'll put it on the wrist and get a sense of what it looks like on the wrist. Let me move out a little bit, improve our focus. Go back to the darker aperture. Now you can see this one on the wrist compared to the Patek. This timepiece, a chunky 13.1 millimeters thick, 40 millimeters in diameter, 47 millimeters lug-to-lug, 19 millimeter lug spacing. Let's talk about its advantages. Steel, durability. This is an everyday wearable watch. So the timepiece, if it takes a nick, if it takes a scratch, easier to refinish and cheaper to do so, as well as less likely to scratch objectively than the white gold of the Patek. The calendar system, bi-directional setting, and you can set it entirely without tools. Easily has the advantage on the Patek in that respect. I happen to like the color and the character, but that's going to be subjective. You may have a different opinion. The timepiece certainly has better legibility. It's simply easier to read, especially given the high contrast between the radial indicators from center and the dial base than the more distinctly grayscale needle hands and dial of the Patek Philippe. I'm also going to give this one an advantage for shipping with a matte finished strap rather than high gloss and a full clasp rather than a pin buckle. When you're paying tens of thousands, you deserve a full clasp. The power reserve of 80 hours is a wonderful advantage, but then again, you do have to wind it. The Patek Philippe's advantages are technology. You wanted Patek to implement hacking seconds, put silicon in all of its watches, not just the grand comps, not just the experimental pieces. Here you have it in the hairspring as well as the escapement. You have hacking seconds, and it's important to note you have automatic winding, so you never need to worry about winding this watch and having your complicated timepiece go dead. You'll also note free-sprung balance for toughness and adjusted in 6 positions, unlike the Laurent Ferrier, which makes no explicit guarantee of precision. This one's guaranteed to keep -3 + 2 seconds per day. Other advantages, the caliber architecture is just more open. It lets you see more of that for which you've paid. The Laurent Ferrier is a bit more cloistered and dominated by a few large bridges. So the Patek Philippe, easier to see as well as objectively more beautiful. Finishing quality is identical on the two watches, but the style is greater on the Patek. Finally, it's just so much slimmer, and how much do you love that ghosted logo? Patek Philippe with the understatement. Who knew? You can see them both and make them yours on the watch box.